They're selling you all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?
I back. Trust me, I back.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
You do nothing. You do nothing. Shut your fucking mouth, you do nothing. You do fucking nothing. Not one of you will do nothing.
I'll tell you what, bro. I was out there, I was fighting all the hitters, bro. You ain't fought no hitters.
Come on, guys. It's normal.
I'm not saying I would fight you. I would kill you.
John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John? I mean, really?
No, don't be scared, homie.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the fuck he wants.
I'm gonna beat you into the living death. I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, people like that get slapped.
That's fucking illegal.
Nick Diaz, you just shook up the world. How's that feel?
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Yeah, this is a simulated death match. And you haven't simulated anybody's death yet.
I said it last year. We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
What is the game plan going in against him?
The game plan is you go in there, hit him with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
I'm gonna go home tonight. I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question.
Any of you radio personalities think you want smoke? Call me Mr. Chimney. I want smoke.
Yes. What is up, MCR family? I hope everyone is having a great Monday. I know this is usually later than our usual shows, but because of Fu's situation, not situation, just day job, average shit. And on top of that, I think the MMA is obviously a second priority to our boxing content for very obvious reasons. Just look at the viewership. You all know that. So these shows, MMA shows, will be usually at a later time, usually at night going forward, just for everyone that sort of can schedule around the show if you want. These are usually going to be around this time in the evening, so to speak. But obviously, this is UFC 234 review. This is Mixed Combat Radio. Smash like button, share the show, subscribe. I'm Matt, the Hipster Hunter, and obviously we're going to break down Israel Adesanya defeating Anderson Silva via unanimous decision in a rather fun and competitive fight that I think a lot of people, including me, not Fu though, Fu was definitely right in his prediction here, and I wasn't, that this fight turned out to be a ultra competitive, fun affair when we all thought we were going to see a public execution. That did not happen. Was it still the star-making performance I think MMA / the UFC needed from Adesanya? I think we can have a debate about that later on the show. But obviously, let's introduce our co-host today, the illustrious Mr. Jesse Fugati. Fugati, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Matt. Doing great. Had a really good day at work. Ready to get into the UFC 234 talk. It's good to see so many people here with us tonight. Sorry for making everyone late, but I got out of work as soon as I could to get here.
Don't worry about it. I mean, obviously, we have day jobs. Like, I even have a day job. There's times, like, I don't have shows, for example, and I have to go do, other gigs to make money and make ends meet, of course. But digress from all that. Don't worry about it. We're here today. We're here tonight, and obviously, it's a podcast. You guys can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Radio, etc. If you're listening to us on iTunes, drop that 5-star review and write the review out. And it's a great way to spread exposure for the show via the podcast form. Obviously, YouTube, like I said, like button, share the show, subscribe, all those things help. And on top of that, head over to patreon.com/Mixed Combat Radio. That link is down below in the description. I also did a show earlier today on Patreon called Championship Rounds. So go check that one out. And we also did a show yesterday, not the Gervonta Davis review show. We did a boxing banter show as well on Patreon. So definitely go check out that content as well, like I said. But digressing from all that, Fu, it's time, man. I feel like I've been waiting to talk about Adesanya versus Silva for like ever, man. Like, that was such a great fight. And it wasn't like a fight of the year contender in my mind in any way, shape, or form. But that was such a thrilling fight as a hardcore fan of the sport and just combat sports in general. I'm glad we're finally talking about it. Fu, we're 2 days out from this fight now. It's Monday. What's your sort of thoughts about it? General thoughts about this fight, UFC 234. I'll be honest, I still have not seen a single fight from this card other than the main event. I've been paid for the pay-per-view on UFC Fight Pass, and guess what? They won't allow me to watch it again. So guess what I did? I did not order the pay-per-view again to watch the whole card. I tried to watch them online, and they are very strict right now on streams and videos. Shout out to the UFC and that fucking anti-piracy machine that they are. But digressing from that, again, Fu, your general thoughts about the event, the main event, and the night overall for the UFC?
I think overall it was a good night for the UFC. They had a really good turnout. I think 15,000 plus at the event. Made some like 25 million off of the door, even with the main event being canceled. So, obviously Australian fans are super hyped about, mixed martial arts. Like, I think they have a very big kickboxing culture over there. I think the UFC won in this event. I know that a lot of people are mad about the pay-per-view. Still having to pay the $65. Kind of wondering what they're going to do with 235 because they said, I guess there might be some stuff there that they do to make up the event for people. Or maybe that's just by putting on one hell of a show because it's looking like it's going to be that. But I was actually showing my son some Adesanya footage.
Oh,
and he's into karate and like ninjas and stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so the whole time he was just like, when he threw the spinning tornado kick, my son was just like, wanted to fight me on the bed, and he kept saying like, I'm gonna fight you like that karate guy, And so I think later when we talk about is he a superstar, I think 100% that guy is gonna be he's gonna blow up.
Yeah, definitely. We will get to that in a second, obviously. I think there's a debate to be had there in a lot of ways. And plus just, looking at the context of the history of MMA and is this the time for another superstar to emerge? I think maybe that will be the argument that I make. But again, digressing to more of the fight itself, this was a fantastic matchup in the cage. I mean, what it turned out to be. I think we got to see Silva do Anderson Silva-like things, like vintage Anderson-like things. We still saw that he was a faded veteran, but can still hang with the top 10, top 15 of the division, obviously. And on top of that, I think we were able to see if you're a real eye for the sport, if you really sort of watch the fight 10, 11 times, whatever it may be, to decipher what the tactics are of Adesanya, we saw, I think, everything we needed to see from a striking perspective to say Israel Adesanya will be able to probably clear out this entire division just from a striking standpoint. There is a couple flaws I will get to as to why I think guys like maybe a Romero, Chris Weidman could be real threats to Adesanya, but other ones in the division, even the champion Whitaker, I don't see anyone really beating Adesanya at this point. For several reasons. I think his understanding and ability to change distance, switch stances, and set up 1,000 different feints while he's doing it, all to set up different combinations that you aren't expecting. Like, it is so cerebral and so active in what he does. He is constantly moving. He is constantly sending you stimulus. He is constantly sending you information that you have to then deal with. You have to then, decipher in some way. And even a guy like Anderson, who in his prime was the king of that, he had stimulus overload. You can tell that Anderson wasn't throwing a combination for a reason. It didn't take till maybe the second half of the second round for Anderson sort of throw caution to the wind, get on the inside and get that single collar clinch and to start throwing some really good combinations on the inside. Other than that, though, on the outside, for most of the fight, Adesanya was just constantly switching stances, constantly messing with the range and the distance of the fight, and constantly throwing feints. The couple criticism I have is that he really failed to set up the high kick. And I don't think that's ultimately a technical flaw because he did everything he could. Again, like I just said before, the amount of stance switching, the amount of feints he threw, let alone the amount of leg kicks he threw, the amount of body kicks he threw, that was all textbook shit to do to set up a high kick. Anderson was just too smart for it. He knew that was the money shot, so to speak, for Adesanya, and he made sure he was never going to let that land. He allowed Adesanya to outbox him predominantly through the fight. And one other criticism of Adesanya I saw, and then I'll get to you, Fu, to sort of break down maybe the technical aspect of this fight. Adesanya routinely, and he's done this before, but he's shown us he's done it again in this fight. He will just run straight back into the fence. And for a guy like Anderson, who he knows isn't going to drop down for a single leg or a double leg, you know, or you know, go for maybe a hip toss, something like that. He knows that the takedown threat is non-existent. He can get away with that. But otherwise, for again, like Weidman, for Romero, for certain stylistic matchups, that is still a massive issue. He relies far too much on that fence to be a guide for him for lateral movement. And I think he needs to sort of get away from that. Maybe it was Anderson, and he knew he could, you know, do that. He knew he can get away with it. We saw with Derek Brunson, who was a very good collegiate wrestler, and before this fight, we saw Adesanya completely shut down the wrestling of Derek Brunson. But let's be honest, Romero, Weidman, two very different animals when it comes to wrestling. But Adesanya, absolute technical brilliance, honestly, from him. And only, again, very two minor criticisms I have of his game plan, his strategy, and his tactics that he employed. Fantastic performance from Adesanya, in my opinion. And again, Anderson Silva did Anderson Silva-like things. Was crafty on the inside, was crafty overall. Definitely had Adesanya respect him at all times. That was a major factor. And I can't wait to see both guys fight again. Fugati, your thoughts more on the technical aspect of this fight?
Yeah, I think you're very much spot on with. He even mentioned in one of his interviews that he didn't think that the speed would be there on the jab, and it caught him off guard. And so his initial response was just to kind of back up, get on his bicycle, and then what was smart about it though is he knew that the knee would come because he knew that the flying knee was going to come after. He said he knew, so immediately he moved to his left, missed the knee. So like it's really good to listen to him break down his fight because you can tell he's very cerebral, right? But stuff that I really like that he talked about, just mind games that Anderson was doing. He said he didn't realize the leg kicks were hurting Anderson till way after the fight because Anderson took a really hard leg kick, but then he just knelt down like he was taunting him, but he was really kneeling down because he didn't want to get kicked in the leg again. But he didn't catch it in the fight, right? So I think that's a good learning experience. I kind of figured this was going to go the full fight just because, Silva's just one of the greatest, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I think Adesanya respected him probably a little bit too much. It's like you're fighting your hero. So I don't know if he went as hard at him as like he would have at other people.
He spoke about that, I believe, either to Helwani's show or to Luke Thomas's show. I'm sorry if which one it is and which one I'm getting wrong. And he basically said like it's Anderson. Like every time he would land that 1-2 and Anderson put his hands down and bait him in, Adesanya would immediately back up. He wouldn't keep pressuring. Was that him being nice to Anderson, like some want to say, and playing easy on him? No, I think Anderson understood at range he cannot compete with Adesanya. He was too slow. Adesanya was too technically brilliant. He could read everything from the outside. There was nothing that Anderson could really do, again, from the outside perspective. He knew he had to get Adesanya in close, in the inside, to where he could make mistakes, where he could be overextended, and Anderson could be on the inside and land maybe a sharp hook, sharp inside knee, something that would damage Adesanya. And that was his hope. And Adesanya knew that completely. And he never, I think, neither guy baited on the other. And we were talking about that in the previous show and that was sort of my reason as to why I thought this fight was going to end by a knockout. I thought Anderson was going to bait on all of Adesanya's stuff, or at least he was eventually going to bait on it and actually take a bite on the bait. and he never did, and vice versa. Like, Adesanya never actually bit on any of the bait that Anderson put out there, which was honestly quite shocking. And also, the fact that that happened and we still got an entertaining fight that was high activity, really technical, that wasn't a, two counter strikers that are sort of negating each other, putting on a bad fight. No, this was still a very high octane fight, but high technical fight. It's just a shock to me in a lot of ways. Sorry, back to you.
No, and the thing that I really liked is you've got to appreciate a fighter with patience. Mm-hmm. There was a fight earlier in the night that I was watching some highlights on, and the guy had hurt his opponent. He was bleeding. And the dude who had hurt him just rushed in. And like I was saying about kind of like the Barrios, like the younger guys in boxing, rushed in to get the knockout and ended up getting caught coming in and got knocked out himself. So it's like his patience as a fighter, only 4 fights into the UFC, kind of the biggest stage on earth for mixed martial arts, he has it. And to speak to some of their points about the strong ground game, I think his first amateur fight was against a really good wrestler, and he got tore up.
Well, it's Derek Brunson's a legit collegiate wrestler and a great, not great, but he's a very talented MMA wrestler. He is. Brad Tavares has really good MMA wrestling. Are they as good as Romero and Weidman? Weidman an All-American, I think multiple-time All-American in college, and Romero being one of the most infamous Cuban amateur wrestlers of all time. No, he has not faced those two guys. But again, that bar is so extremely high that Whitaker hasn't really faced a wrestler other than Romero, and he struggled with Romero at times. He arguably lost to Romero. Weidman lost to Romero. I don't think Whitaker's ever fought Chris Weidman. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think he has. I would say that those two guys one's a former champion, and both of them are some of the best wrestlers, period, in MMA. It's those two, John Jones, Cain Velasquez, Daniel Cormier. That's the group. Khabib Nurmagomedov, Ben Askren. It's those guys. I think it's okay to say Israel Adesanya hasn't faced that level of wrestler, that level of person with a ground game, but he has faced people with strong ground games. I think that's a false point to put out there by Adesanya. He has faced people with good ground games. Has he faced the elite of the elite? Some of the top 10 ground games in the sport right now? No, but he will obviously very soon, in my opinion. Those fights are unavoidable coming up.
Yeah, and I think he's mentally probably levels above those guys. His strategy, I think, will get him through those fights ultimately. Even with Brunson, you could tell, he knew exactly when he was going to shoot for the takedown. He reads people really well. So I think that he'll make it through those fights. I really feel like you're right on the take that he's going to walk through that division. The guy is really just an amazing fighter. He's very calm, very collected. I don't think enough people put enough emphasis on going in there against a guy that's your hero, basically. He looked up to Anderson, and that's the reason he got into fighting.
Well, I was trying to find the audio. I was texting Anthony Walker from Sherdog trying to remind myself what post-fight interview it was, or should I say post-fight in-cage interview it was, where Anderson basically said, I want to fight my clone next, right? And this was years ago, right? And at the time, it was Roy Jones Jr., right? That's who he wanted to face, was Roy Jones, right? And this was past prime Roy Jones, but still, it was around the time of it was right after the Tarver loss, and the Antonio Tarver loss, I believe. So around that period of time, I wanted to find that audio to play it, because this fight was that. Adesanya was sort of the clone of Anderson. These two guys mirrored each other in a lot of ways. And then obviously right after the fight was over, The UFC even put this out. There's audio of it, of them two, embracing each other, hugging each other, and Anderson literally saying, like, I'm passing the torch to you. Like, it's your time now. It's your division. And, like, I got goosebumps. Like, I got chills. Like, that was, star making in a way, if you want to sort of go to that conversation now. Like, that was a moment. ESPN needs to be playing that 24/7, in my opinion. Because you can't, like, how often does that happen in sports? Where a former generation literally loses in a competitive, ultra fun fight with the next seemingly superstar of that sport, and then say it, and we catch it on tape, them saying that the torch is passed to you. Like, that just doesn't happen often. I bet Santiago can call in and bring up a couple boxing examples. The closest one I can think of is when, like, Ali went to Mike Tyson when he fought Larry Holmes and was like, go beat this guy's ass, right? Because Larry Holmes beat up Muhammad Ali, right? And Ali was kind of bitter. Right? That's like the closest thing I can think of, but that's not even a 1-to-1 analog of Silva versus Adesanya. Fu, you said this, that Adesanya is a superstar. How instantaneous is this superstar-ism, so to speak? Like, do we think that an Adesanya-Whitaker pay-per-view in the next 6 months does a adequate, I'm not going to say, like, really good, a million buys, but does it do an adequate buy rate? Because I think all assumptions are pretty much safe that this buy rate is not going to be good. Though that's no discredit to him. He was literally a main event on a day's notice for a pay-per-view. I don't think that's ever happened before in the history of combat sports. Maybe one other time in UFC history. I'm trying to think of one. This is quite odd of a case where, again, like I've said, star-making performance, star-making moment with Anderson Silva post-fight. How many people saw it? Does it get pushed enough? Do the fans push it enough? Is this, again, Adesanya going from hardcore hype train, in a sense? I'm using hype as a positive connotation, not a negative connotation, to a quote superstar.
Well, I really think in any sport, like, a good striker is going to be a favorite, like a Conor McGregor. No one loves Conor McGregor because he's great. He's got a great ground game or something, They love it because he's got a killer left hand, great head movement, and he knocks people out, So, I mean, that's what people want to see. So I think Adesanya could be that next guy. Because I think he's got everything you would want. He's great in interviews. He talks shit really well. Even the way he kind of like bantered with the crowd afterwards, like he kind of did the Rock's thing. He was like, "What the fuck you gonna do?" And all that. And he really is willing to banter, right? So I could see it doing really well. I also think the UFC is really going to get behind that guy. I think they see him as like the next, big star for them. So I don't know what the buys it would do, because I don't really know pay-per-view buy rates, and it depends on who else they put on the card. 20K, and Mario saying 20,000.
This is not going to do good. Whitaker, for example, has done under 200,000 pay-per-view buy rates before. Like he has done, like, I think, like the Romero rematch was like 190. So we're talking like Ward Kovalev numbers, right? Like, we're not talking good numbers here.
Boy.
And again, Whitaker was the main event until 12 hours before fight time. Until he had a hernia surgery, poor guy. And I don't see, even though this fight was the marquee fight of the night, let's be honest, I don't think this being catapulted to the main event meant it did more numbers. I think it probably did less numbers, to be honest. If it wasn't for, allegedly, if it wasn't for all my illegal streams cutting out because the UFC is a pain in the ass, I wouldn't have bought this pay-per-view. I felt like I was taking a moral stance against it, and then in the prelims, like everything was cutting out, and I tried like 5 different streams allegedly, and so I was like, "Fuck, I'm gonna buy this pay-per-view," and I did. I don't think a lot of people were me. I think people decided, okay, I'm gonna take the night off. I'll watch this one later. I'll watch it on YouTube, which you can find a video of that has 500,000 views of on YouTube right now. It's a shitty quality, but it has 500,000 views on it. How many people did that? I think quite a bit. If one YouTube video on YouTube had 500,000 views, think about all the different illegal streams that people were watching on Saturday night. Like, again, a lot of people may have watched this. It may have been, a star-making performance. I don't think the buy rate's going to reflect that. So it's going to be interesting to see what the next one is, how it's marketed, how it's packaged. Is Adesanya going to be a main event? What tier of main event is it going to be? An ESPN card, ESPN Plus, pay-per-view? Those are all very indicative, in my opinion, of what the UFC thinks of Adesanya potentially. But quickly, I just wanted to speak from like a generational standpoint of stardom. Every 5 to 10 years, a new generation comes into the sport. I feel like that's kind of known. If you don't know that, that's basically what happens. Next generation of champions, next generation of stars. That's usually how it happens. For example, John Jones, Fugatti. You want to guess when his UFC debut was? What year it was? This shocked me how long ago it was. Oh my god. Fu.
2010.
Well, you want to get closer to the mic, or you want to be like,
Oh, 2010.
There
sorry.
you go. That was better. Thank you. Audio quality there. No, 2010. He became champion in 2011. Conor McGregor, UFC debut 2013. Ronda Rousey, Showtime debut, because remember she was on Strikeforce before the UFC had women's champions, and then obviously because of Ronda Rousey's success on Showtime, they bought Strikeforce and they brought her as a UFC champion. Her Showtime debut was 2011. Her UFC debut was 2013. It's obviously 2019 now, so we've just reached past the point of 5 years since these other stars debuted, became relative commodities in the sport, or became known to the sport. I think Adesanya is probably the start of the next wave of stars. Whatever, if it's him, somebody else, maybe one other person, that's who we're looking at. I just think that, again, generationally speaking, that happens. You need that turnover rate for stars. Ronda Rousey's already left the UFC. Conor McGregor is, God knows what he's doing, man, honestly. He is living the life.
He's bigger than the UFC.
He is, man. And he's, He is. So he's off talking about Proper 12 for forever and making bank off of that. John Jones, he just came back from a suspension. God knows when that's going to happen again. But he just did 700,000 buys. The UFC desperately needs John Jones to stay around, even though he's probably the oldest one of that generation, obviously, of the McGregor's, Rousey. He is the oldest. I think Adesanya, is needed not only for the UFC, he's needed for MMA. And I think, by the rules of just the universe and how it works, I think Adesanya is on that path. Like momentum, it just seems so likely at this point that Whitaker comes in here, maybe beats the Chris Weidman next, and then beats the winner of Whitaker-Gastelum if they remake that fight. And we have a Adesanya title reign for however long it is, and he's going to be a massive, bankable star. Just imagine him doing like the media circuit, like in New York, like the late night circuit, the radio circuit, him going to like Breakfast Club, Sway. Like, he will be such a magnet for this sport, I think, that if it doesn't happen, like if somehow he slips and falls in his next step up, that would be really sad, I think. I also think it won't be indicative of him not actually being that level. This is MMA. He is due to lose at some point. Conor McGregor lost several times and obviously is still doing mega numbers. So that's not, again, a prerequisite for stardom is that O.
Mega numbers. Mega numbers. Did you see like what Vegas pulled in just from him having the fight there?
No.
$84 million
Of just like tax revenue?
Of just like business, extra
Oh,
business
okay, yeah.
money and all that. It's like
just
84
capital raise.
million. Like, good Lord.
Adesanya could be that, especially in the Oceanic area, which I know you maybe not know. That is a massive market in MMA. Hit up Mickey sometime and talk to him about that. Like he's always sort of hated it because he's a boxing fan, right? And he's like, "God damn, MMA is so big," but boxing isn't. MMA is massive in Australia and New Zealand. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, like how we have boxing gyms, it's like they have kickboxing gyms over there.
Yeah.
Like it's like everywhere, and that's where like all the big time kickboxing trainers are.
A lot of Muay Thai there as well, obviously, just because it's the proximity to Thailand and just the Asian market. Anything else about this fight and honestly this card? Because like I said, I've not seen anything else. Quick rundown of some names. I did see the Devontae Smith knockout of Dong Hun Ma. That was absolutely fantastic on ESPN. And plus, I love that guy. I think he's absolutely hilarious. Fantastic fighter. Lando Venata, he won by submission. Montana De La Rosa, shout out to her for winning by submission as well. That's all about I'm going to give the shout outs for. Because
I mean, obviously, like
I didn't see and don't know of.
Silva and Adesanya was the fight of the night. Montana and Devonta got a performance of the night, I believe.
Yes.
I think Mario wanted us to talk about Adesanya asking for the pay-per-view points, like asking for some extra pay.
I definitely want to get into that.
Okay, cool.
We can jump into that right now. Actually, when this came out, I think it came out before the fight actually happened. I'll be honest, and the thought ran in my head like, what if Adesanya or Silva said, "Look, we're not going to be main event until we get pay-per-view points." I wonder what the story would be if that was to happen, right? I wonder if we would be sitting here saying that the UFC canceled the show, the UFC made the show ESPN, so they didn't have to pay them pay-per-view points and still put them in the main event, right? And make the argument, like find a loophole, or they give them pay-per-view points. I wonder what that would have been like if either one took that stance. Now, obviously, I think if Adesanya got his wish that this was a 5-round fight and he would get pay-per-view points, so would Silva. And if Silva agreed to that, I think the UFC would have agreed to it as well. I will add that caveat. From the way Adesanya presented it that seemed likely. And it was Anderson who turned down the 5-round option, which the UFC used as an excuse or a reason, whichever word you want to use, as to turn down Adesanya's claim of deserving pay-per-view points. I would still make the argument that they still deserve pay-per-view points for being a main event on less than 24 hours notice for a pay-per-view, regardless of it being a 5-round fight, because they trained for a 3-round fight. I think they have every right to turn down a 5-round fight. On top of that, I think they have every right to also claim pay-per-view points. But this is also just a case of, hey, UFC fighters, Project Spearhead. It's been there for fucking years now. Leslie Smith, she's on Twitter saying, hey, contact me. Everyone contact me. Lucas Middlebrook, go check out our interview with him from years back, way before Project Spearhead. Like, there is an apparatus to fix this problem and to make sure that, hey, if you're a main event on pay-per-view, you automatically get pay-per-view points. Regardless if it's on a day's notice, a week's notice, fucking who cares? If you're, even if, like, let's say a fighter drops out and they have somebody come in like a TJ Dillashaw, Joe Soto situation, Joe Soto should get pay-per-view points for coming in on 24 hours notice. And, even though TJ Dillashaw is already getting it. They shouldn't treat Joe Soto different than any other B-side for pay-per-view. But no, those sort of, what's the right word? Those sort of standards and guidelines don't exist because fighters are not actually capitalizing on that attempt at a collective bargaining agreement, a union, an association, whatever word you want to use, and to actually create an apparatus to, again, set standards and guidelines for how UFC fighters are treated and how conduct is expected. Because, again, Adesanya and Silva was already the biggest fight on this card. And it being the main event and them not getting pay-per-view is ridiculous. Like, that's just another sign of the UFC being greedy as hell. Like, no one else on this card deserved a big paycheck. I'm just being honest. Adesanya and Silva was it for this card. And the fact that they didn't get any pay-per-view points for single-handedly carrying an entire UFC pay-per-view, utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. Fu, your thoughts on this matter and this news story?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know for sure that they won't get the pay-per-view points. I would say it's highly unlikely, right? Because, I mean, like, like Mario said, Dana runs at shit like a mob boss. So, I mean, it's...
Very quickly, just because I want to always make this distinction, WME. Because they're the real owners.
WME, gotcha.
They're the real owners of the UFC. Dana has no ownership. He is just a spokesperson at this point.
Yeah, and what I do appreciate, though, is that Israel came out and basically said, we deserve pay-per-view points. Like, we put on a show, we put on a hell of a fight. We did it with 1 day's notice. That the place was still packed. And, the door did $24 million. It's not like, I don't think anyone was less interested because that one fight fell off. Because like you said, I think that was the biggest fight on the card. It probably should have been the main event. It just wasn't for a belt, so I imagine that's why it wasn't.
Like, if this was a boxing promotion, I guarantee you, like, Adesanya Silva would have been for some, like, regular belt for the WBA and been the main event over a legit champion. Like, that would have 100% happened, ladies and gentlemen. Like, but the UFC is in a very archaic 2005 model of their business still, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, so... I mean, I hope it happens. I hope they make it right with the fighters, especially those two. But I also hope they make it right with the fans because they didn't lower the price of the pay-per-view. They didn't lower they offered refunds on tickets, but it's not like they just offered reimbursement on a portion of the ticket or something. It was like either come or don't type thing. So,
well, just briefly think about this. Like the gate was $2.47 million. Just the gate alone. How much of that do you think the fighters got?
I mean, I don't even know in the UFC. Is that part of their pay or are they? I mean, because it's like a salary basically, right? In the UFC? No? I thought they had like a certain like purse they paid people.
Well, I mean,
it's like
they own
the fighters basically.
But salary and purses are different. Like, there's still purses like boxing, right? They do have win bonuses. That's very different than boxing.
Yeah.
So you have your fight purse and your guarantee purse, and you have a win bonus. It's the actual contract terminology is different than that. They don't call it a win bonus specifically in the contracts. It's weird, but digressing from that. No, I would doubt they get most. I would say pay-per-view points work very different in MMA, and overall, I would assume most fighters don't get pay-per-view points. Like when Demetrius Johnson finally got pay-per-view points, that became a big deal. That was a big storyline. And that was well into his title reign. That was like title defense number 5 or 6, right? And think about, I think and again, like Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, they only reached 4 or 5 title defenses, and they're legends, right? Demetrius Johnson reached like 7, 8, 9, and he finally got pay-per-view points. It's just ridiculous, again, the payout. And I think Adesanya, like any star, Conor McGregor, for example, Ronda Rousey, John Jones, like, all of them should use their leverage and their platform that they have, their celebrity, their star power, for fighter benefits, right? Like, they should do it on the fighter's behalf. But they don't. And that's never going to happen because look at the people we're dealing with. John Jones, is he really going to go out of his way to be empathetical and work towards fighter safety and a collective bargaining agreement? Doubtful. Conor McGregor? Doubtful. None of these guys seem like they're going to really take that stance. And that is what it is. Separate topic. But back to the point at hand, Adesanya and Silva, they absolutely deserve pay-per-view points. They're just, I assume the UFC was not going to give them that for obvious reason. Would have been interesting to see if they did hold out, though. What would have happened? Because there's no way the UFC could have gone to Lando Venata as a pay-per-view headliner, right? Or like Jimmy Crute versus Sam Alvey or whatever his fucking name is, right? Like, there's no way they could have done that. They needed Silva Adesanya to carry this entire card and this entire pay-per-view. That is ultimate leverage. Even though Adesanya is young in his career, it would have been very interesting to see him actually apply that leverage to the UFC. Because he would have won, in my opinion, at the end of the day. I think he would have.
Oh, I think for sure. I think, so I'm sorry, and I'll apologize to everyone. I didn't mean like salary in terms of like my salary, but I think they have like a certain payout for the type of fight, right? It's pretty standard in the UFC, like how they pay people.
No, not really. Like their standard pay would be like the Reebok deal, right? So like how many fights you have in the promotion determines how much your Reebok sponsorship is, right?
Okay.
Like that was the 24 million figure I sent to you, right? Where the total Reebok payout over the entire history of Reebok has been $24 million, allegedly.
That's been a couple years now, right? Or so.
It's been longer than that. I think it's been like 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
So it's been going on 4 years now, I want to say, for the Reebok deal. Yeah. But anyways,
not to get in the weeds about pay.
No, it's
boring.
Yeah, it's very boring, and fighters aren't getting paid. Like that's the gist of it. That's all you need to know is that UFC fighters, especially at the very top, don't get nearly as paid as much as they should. Like it is very uncommon to see UFC fighters make over $1 million guaranteed. Think about this: Gervonta Davis just made $1 million guaranteed to fight Hugo Ruiz, right, on Showtime, and that probably did what, 250 to 350,000 viewership, right? Like 250. Like
we got boxers saying slave contracts on $5 million. I mean, $8 million. Like it's crazy.
Daniel Cormier just made $500K to fight like fucking Derek Lewis and like Stipe Miocic. Like, come on, like it's ridiculous what UFC fighters are getting paid, even at the very top. You could make an argument that people like Conor McGregor, John Jones are criminally underpaid for what the value they bring in. Like John Jones doing 700,000 pay-per-view buys, and just humor me here. Can you please look up what his base pay was for that? You can probably just look up on the Wikipedia for UFC 232 or whatever it was. I'm curious what that was, because I don't think it was a lot. I don't think it was $1 million. If it was, I'm really shocked. I'll be honest. And even then, that's a fighter doing 700,000 pay-per-view buys, getting a guaranteed pay of $1 million, maybe. That is criminal. It is, and I'm not the biggest like John Jones fan, so to speak, right? Like, I'm not the biggest cheerleader of Conor McGregor, but these guys are underpaid. Yes.
Total purses, $3.5 million for the entire card.
Entire card, $3.5 million purses for the entire card for a pay-per-view that did 700,000 pay-per-view buys. Continue.
$500K for both Gustafsson and Jones. Surprisingly, Cyborg $500K and Nunes $350K. Everyone else
criminal.
I mean,
now quickly, Food, just humor me. Look up Canelo Alvarez versus Amir Khan payout.
Oh my God.
And that pay-per-view did around, I think it was like 480,000 buys. I think the initial reporting was around 600, but that dropped down to 400 something. A card that did 200 to 300,000 less pay-per-view buys. That's a significant chunk of change. Let's see what the different buy rate is for that. Again, let alone Gervonta Davis just making $1 million guaranteed for a card that's not going to break 500,000 viewers on Showtime. Again, when John Jones only makes $500,000 guaranteed for a fight.
Says Canelo was guaranteed 3.5 mil.
Oh. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't the entire payout for the UFC card $3.5 million?
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Like, I'm not a mathematician. Like, I didn't go to school for math. I went for history because I obviously sucked at math, right? That's what people do when they suck at math. They go to like history or something, or philosophy or some bullshit major, right? That's what I did. But if you're John Jones and you're sitting there and you hear this, how are you okay with this, right? And if you're Israel Adesanya, who's now coming up in this, you must be aware. Like, you must see the tea leaves and understand that that's an issue. Mario Amasaki saying in the chat, is Bellator payout any better? Serious question. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Though, to be honest, Bellator does far less viewers. Like, it's a different total product in terms of gross revenue. But still, you can make a vast argument they are underpaid as well, especially the guys at the top. But digressing again back to this, Fu, how, if you're, again, John Jones, if you're Israel Adesanya, if you're McGregor, if you're anyone at the top, Khabib, whoever, how are you not looking at this and saying, look, something's phony here. Like, the shit's not right here. This doesn't make sense to me. It's not adding up. You know, how is that not happening?
Well, I think your point about unionizing is what they're going to have to do, because it's similar to the NFL. It's similar to, like the NBA, similar to baseball. You got to have like a players union. You really need a fighters union. They need to have more of a profit sharing model. I think even in that one fight, they said it was something like $10 million without everything calculated, and only 3.5 went to the fighters. So what I think is there's just not a better place for them to go. The UFC's the end all be all. A lot of these guys care more about competing against the best. They'll take $500K to make sure they get to do that, because there's no place else they can do that at.
Yeah, but a guy like John Jones, like, he has leverage. Like, the UFC is not going to let him go. If John Jones just decided, you know what, I'm not going to fight anymore for you guys. I'm going to hold out for my contract until you guys pay me more. Just took that stance just for himself solely. Not even union, collective bargaining, not even getting to that, which is a completely different war and battle with the UFC. John Jones individually, he can absolutely do that, right? Conor McGregor can absolutely hold out and say, you know what, I want a stake in the company. I want XYZ. I'm not fighting anymore. I don't have to. You guys can own my fighting rights for the rest of my life, and I won't fight again. And I'll still make a ton of money doing seminars. I have my own gym. I'm John Jones. I'm Conor McGregor. I'm bigger than you at this point. You need me way more than I need you. You don't think that that's true? Like, you don't think that they have the ultimate leverage? Those, like, especially those two guys specifically.
Oh, absolutely. I think they do. It's just like they're the wrong people to have that leverage, because they're only going to use it selfishly.
True.
Like, think about how McGregor was able to manipulate the UFC to get the Mayweather fight, and he got co-promotional rights to it. And now he's got his whiskey. He's made his name on the UFC. He's got tons of, like, the UFC really screwed the fighters when they stopped allowing them to have their own sponsors, and they went straight Reebok or whatever it is. Reebok, right?
Yeah. And also a huge like feather in the cap of the people that want to unionize is that move. Like, you gave them set standard uniforms. How are they not employees? What a bullshit move.
Well, exactly. But, those two guys you said, John Jones, Conor McGregor, are those guys going to push for unionizing? Are they going to use all of that leverage to help other fighters, to help up-and-comers? No, I mean, they're trying to get their money and get the fuck out. Like, they're trying to...
Again, I agree with you, but why don't we see them do that even for themselves? You know what I mean? Like, they don't even do that selfishly. Like, maybe John Jones, obviously, it's his comeback fight. He was off suspension. Like, is he really in the right place to really argue at that point? No, I think he needed this win. He needed that buy rate. Now, I think going forward, he has true leverage back. But Conor, I mean, he could sit out indefinitely and make millions still and tell the UFC, fuck off, send me a check for $30 million per fight. He could legitimately do that, and they need to bend to that. Because right now, if you're the UFC, Adesanya is not going to do 1 million buys. You don't have the superstar yet. in Adesanya to sort of stitch it back to what we're talking about. You only have Conor and John. That type of leverage, I think, is so powerful, and yet the lack of self-awareness by those two guys right now and how to use it, even selfishly, is just weird to me. Like, you would think guys that are that smart in a fighting aspect, right, that obviously done so well for themselves from a business standpoint, how they can't see the value they innately bring to the table and how they don't actually apply the leverage they have. It baffles me, I'll be honest.
I think the issue with John is if he tries to put too much of his weight against the UFC, is that they could really spin a narrative and just be like, yeah, we're letting him go because of his past or because of the drug problems or whatever, right? And they could get a PR kind of stunt win out of that. I don't know what they would do with Conor. I mean, he's had his issues too, but
let's go like real world situation. Let's say they do that. Let's say hypothetically, thought experiment, to use your boy Sam Harris, his words. Let's say Conor, John both have this holdout moment that I'm talking about, and let's say the UFC doesn't budge. Right? What does the UFC do next for their next 12 months of their schedule? Who are the scabs they're going to bring in? And I use that term very loosely. Relaxed fighters. What scabs are they going to bring in to do numbers adequate enough so that their shareholders, whoever it may be, that they report to, and they say, hey, these are good enough numbers, right? Like at the execs at ESPN, like do they really have the stars to support the sport for enough time to hold out for those guys and win in that argument? I don't think so. I think the UFC would take a huge loss business-wise, in my opinion.
I think you're right. I don't think they have a lineup that could sustain that, and ultimately shareholders and ESPN deals and things like that would come into play. It's an interesting thing. I wonder, especially with the money that's in boxing at the moment, when you see these deals of because you saw the money that's behind the UFC ESPN deal.
It's $300 million per year.
It's a lot of fucking money,
give or take.
So if it's not going to the fighters, whereas you see a $100 million a year DAZN deal for Matchroom, and they're paying fighters
a lot,
$2-3 million a fight. Tevin Farmer's making bank.
Look at Canelo.
Canelo. I mean, so
whatever,
they're taking $100 million and investing it.
Whatever Triple G is going to get, if you are any UFC fighter out there, pay attention to what Triple G gets, because a lot of you are bigger stars than Triple G. Daniel Cormier, Khabib, obviously the Conor, John Jones, that atmosphere. I would probably argue maybe even like a Max Holloway is a bigger star than Triple G. There is, again, fighters, you gotta just see what's happening here and how much you're getting ripped off. Like boxing, they're getting paid over there for significantly less views, exposure, ticket sales, etc. Like Danny Garcia, he's making $2 million plus every fight, it seems, probably. Like, how is that possible when I can name probably 10 people that do better numbers than him?
Rigo made $750,000 fighting Loma. It's fairly unknown. Fairly unknown fighter. He's only a hardcore fighter, Loma wasn't the guy he is now. I mean, Loma just got to breaking 2 million views on ESPN.
Luis fucking Ortiz got paid the same amount John Jones did.
Yeah.
That is just crazy. It's
a problem. It's a problem too, because if the sport wants to grow, if you get someone who's a really good striker, you could have had an Adesanya go boxing. But the only reason he didn't is because he said he wanted to mix it up with people. He would have not felt like he met his true potential if he could have been beat by a wrestler. He wanted to be in the ring with someone who had different fighting styles and beat them on their best, right? Well, I mean, Mario, he's known, but he's not you know what I mean? If you're a hardcore boxing fan, you'll know Rigo, but you're not a ton of people are just out talking about Rigo.
Yeah. For example, will Rigo ever be able to headline a pay-per-view that does 700,000 buys? No. Like that world just does not exist. You know, and he got paid $250,000 more guaranteed than John Jones did. Like,
Wild.
That is insane. That is so crazy that I think, like, if you're not like flabbergasted by that comparison, that juxtaposition, like, I don't know what will jar you in terms of like how much like we need a Project Spearhead in this space, and how important it is, and how underutilized it is. Because, God, when the fighters at the very top, the 1% of the UFC, are getting ripped off, like, imagine what the guys at the bottom are honestly getting ripped off. Honestly, like, it's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got on this rabbit hole, but
we went on a tangent there.
Huge tangent. What else do we want to get to? Let's get to like what's next quickly for Silva and Adesanya. Obviously, Chris Weidman came out and was said like, oh, he's overrated, right? Like, sent out a little tweet out, and Adesanya came back on the MMA Hour with Luke Thomas and said he said some shit about Chris Weidman and called Paulo Borrachina Costa a juice monkey. That's funny. Just also because Borrachina is a Bolsonaro supporter, so I gave two shits about Borrachina, just being honest. What do we want next for either guy? Also, Anderson Silva, just to sort of add to that, he's called out Nick Diaz and Conor McGregor. Nick Diaz has turned down the fight, and we'll get to that in a bit as well, as to why that happened and just how sad it is. God damn it. But what do we want next for these two gentlemen? I think
it's so sad.
Hold on. I don't want to get that sad yet, because that's just super depressing. Adesanya, what do you want next for him? Me personally, I would love a Chris Weidman fight. I think that makes the most sense in the world in my mind, because I think Borrachina is going to fight Yoel Romero. I think they're going to run back the Whittaker-Gastelum fight. I don't think Whittaker's going to be out for too long, maybe a month and a half, maybe 2 months. And I think we should just get Adesanya Weidman. Let's have that test. Let's see how it happens. And plus, Weidman does have a win over Kelvin Gastelum. So it is the rightful number one contender fight in a lot of ways. It does sort of clear up a lane, and it does clearly set Weidman Adesanya as the clear number one contender, and Borrachina versus Yoel Romero as the secondary, so to speak, unofficially so. That would be what I would do. Not speaking of Anderson yet. Fu, what would you want for Adesanya coming up?
I mean, that's a hell of a fight, right? I mean, people want to see him prove himself against someone with a very impressive ground game. So let's see it. I think Romero's a good fight. Yeah, like I said, though, I think he's lined up with something else. But I think Adesanya says he's going to take some time off, and he's just going to wait for the Gastelum Whittaker winner.
Don't do that. Don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, no one wants him to do it, right? Jacare,
my issue with Jacare is that he has recently lost to the guys that we're mentioning. Kelvin Gastelum, even though that was controversial. He's lost to Chris Weidman. Like, I want a better fight for Adesanya. Like, I think Jacare should go fight somebody that has recently lost as well. Maybe like a David Brandt, something like that. I just think it doesn't do enough for Adesanya as some, I think, even though obviously it is a massive test for him, similar ways to Weidman, but Weidman is far more of a complete fighter at this weight class. I think he's a better athlete at this weight class as well. Even though I think he should go up to 205, I know he won't. Shout out to Jason Burgos, who is a Share Dog colleague of mine. He's interviewed his strength and conditioning coach, and that is just not on the table for them right now, which is unfortunate because we always wanted that John Jones, Chris Weidman fight. But digressing, Adesanya Weidman to me just makes the most sense. It's like saying you beat Weidman by KO. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Weidman was winning that fight too. God damn. Okay, then throw Jacare in there. Fuck it, why not? Any one of those guys. Like, I want somebody with better wrestling and grappling credentials, right? I want somebody that will test him in those aspects because Anderson Silva wasn't going to do that. So Weidman, Jacare, wait for a winner of Boachina, Romero, wait for the winner of Gastelum, Whitaker, if that's promised to you. Any one of those matchups, I will be okay with. I just want to see Adesanya fight again, I'll be honest.
Yeah. But I mean, I think he's fought it's not like it's not 5 times within like this year, obviously like 2018, but 5 times within a calendar year, I believe, this last fight.
Yes.
So
yes.
I think he does want a little bit of time off, but they're saying 4 to 6 weeks for Whitaker anyways. And so, I mean, assuming that fight gets made pretty quickly once he comes back with Gastelum getting his shot again. But you know, it is the UFC, so they could throw Adesanya in there over Gastelum. Who knows? You know?
Very quickly, Mario Amasaki saying hopefully Adesanya isn't another Pettis. Don't even say that. Stop. Don't put that bad juju out there, man. Stop. Just put that out of the universe. We don't want that. We do not want that comparison at all. Now, Anderson Silva. Obviously, Nick Diaz has said no mas to this matchup. Again, we're going to get to that in a bit. Conor McGregor, though, has been receptive, so to speak, of this matchup as well. Do we want Anderson Silva versus Conor McGregor? I would say no. I know the matchup I personally want, but I want to hear you sort of discuss it first, Fugatti. Do you want Silva versus McGregor 2019?
No, I don't think it does anything for either guy, really. And I know Dana's already pretty much said, like...
Ignore that.
Oh, okay.
Ignore that.
Ignore that.
Yeah, because
okay.
it will make money. Like, it will make a boatload of cash.
Sure.
The UFC will always ignore that for Conor McGregor. And again, Conor does get his way a lot when it comes to matchups.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a good matchup for Conor. I mean, it's a break from getting mauled by...
is it a good matchup for Conor?
Wrestlers. I mean, I think it's a tough fight. I'm not saying it's not a tough fight. I'm just saying he's been mauled by wrestlers, you know.
True.
So it's a stand-up fight.
It's a better stylistic matchup potentially than let's say he went up to 185 and fought Romero or Weidman or Jacare. Like, that would be suicidal. But Anderson Silva is still a guy that's gone up to 205 and beaten legit talent, right? Like, I would be really, really worried about a Conor McGregor moving up to 185 and fighting Anderson Silva. That would seem like suicide for Conor. That's just too big of a hill to climb. Like, weight classes exist for a reason, even though Anderson Silva is past his prime. The fight I want, I'll be honest, I want Anderson Silva versus GSP. I'm telling you, it's time for our Manny Pacquiao Mayweather moment, where the fight is now 8 years past its expiration date, but we're finally getting it. That's what I want. Are we going to get it? Doubtful. Really doubtful. I think we can get like an Anderson Silva versus, God, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think it's going to be anyone good. I'll be honest. I think they're going to try to give him a soft touch to sort of get him a win, in my opinion. I think you sort of have to. It'll be a hometown fight probably in Brazil. I think you give him a soft touch. But, God, Anderson Silva versus GSP, I want that. I really do. I really do. Fu, any other thoughts on Silva, fight next, or anything about this matchup, the card itself, anything? Any other points you want to discuss?
Do you think it's his final fight?
No.
I think they could really look at doing Weidman 3. So, I mean, I know that immediately when it was mentioned that Dana was pretty hyped on it. Like, yeah, I'd look at doing that. That's a good fight, you know. And obviously, I think Silva would be down for that, you know, real quick. So
I don't want that. I think Weidman's I think Weidman's still a very bad style matchup for Anderson Silva. Like, even though Weidman's chin has deteriorated over time for obvious reasons and very rapidly, his athleticism has declined rapidly over time. I still think Weidman stylistically is just such a bad matchup for Anderson Silva. That would be like wanting, not to the degree, but that would be like wanting Romero versus Anderson Silva. Like, why? Why would we do this? Mario's saying Luke Rockhold. Luke's moving up to 205. I think that's probably out of the equation right now, to be honest. But I'll be honest. Anderson versus GSP. Just give me that, please. MMA gods, if you're out there and you're real, please. I'm praying to you. I sacrifice a goat in the backyard, whatever it takes to get that fight. Just make it fucking happen, please, before I die. And before they die, because they're going to die before
That's a super fun fight.
It still is. Hell yeah.
Who would you pick in that fight?
GSP, hands down.
Of course, yeah.
Stop.
Submission?
Depends on if it's a 3-round or 5-round fight. If it's 5 rounds, I see a finish for GSP. Probably a submission, but one of those, like, he hurts him, and then he submits him when he's hurt. You know, one of those situations.
They're fake.
Please just make this fight happen, please. Alexander, stop saying they're fake. They're real, damn it. It's still real to me, please. But let's get to the Nick Diaz news. Oh man, I accidentally deleted it from my topic list. Oh well. Nick Diaz has come out and said that he doesn't want to come back to MMA. He doesn't want to fucking hurt people anymore. He just wants to party. And look, Nick, we've seen you in pictures since you've come back to California, since your 4-year binge in Las Vegas. Yeah, we know you like to party, man. We know. We know it's aged you about 15 years. We know. It reminds me of, remember old cut and a very white person deep cut. Remember Matthew Perry and Friends when he got off coke?
Oh, God.
When he got off coke and got all fat, right? Yo, Nick Diaz is so close to that, man. Like, you can see it in his face, right? He has those chubby cheeks and his eyes look like he's been on cocaine for fucking 4 years straight. Alexander, it's not the weed. Trust me. Trust me. It's not the weed. Just saying. Trust me. Trust. So I'm actually sort of happy Nick Diaz said this. Yes, it pains me to admit that Nick Diaz probably will never come back to MMA again, which is extremely sad. And Nate could probably do it as well, even though I don't think he's on a coke binge in Las Vegas for half a decade. I do think it's the best decision. I think Nick Diaz coming back would be a very bad idea. I think he is clearly not in the game in any sort of way. I think he clearly has not taken care of his body. He's clearly in an unhealthy state. I think he would only get hurt in this era of MMA right now. So I'm ultimately happy this has happened. And also it's sort of a resolution like, hey, we can stop talking about Nick Diaz now. We can stop mentioning matchups. We can stop talking to Dana White or whoever about who will Nick Diaz fight. It's not happening. Let that man be in peace. Let him be go on his IG story, riding bicycles and doing cocaine, whatever it may be, allegedly. Let that man just be in peace. I think he wants that. I think we should give it to him. I don't want another Jason Mayhem Miller situation, and hopefully that doesn't happen here. But Nick Diaz, live your life, man. Just be happy. Please just be happy, because you're definitely one guy that you should be seeing a therapist, just being honest. Fu, your thoughts on Nick Diaz basically saying, I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to be happy and party.
I mean, I just love the guy.
Yeah, we all do.
He's so hilarious. Like, I don't want to hurt people. I just want to party. Like, what a statement. I'm just gonna live my best life. I don't want to fight people anymore. Also, I think it seems like the Diaz brothers are just kind of like, fuck the UFC and their bullshit. Like, we just don't want to deal with them, like, no, I think Nick was pretty, no, I'm sorry, Nate, right? Nate was pretty pissed off about the whole shit with Conor and Khabib,
Yep.
and
Remember, he stormed out of the press conference when that was announced. He came in, and the big fight was him and Dustin Poirier. That was announced, and then all of a sudden, promo rolls for Conor Khabib. He just walked out. So, I mean, this is the Diaz brothers, and them. Like, this is completely in character in my mind. If anything, the only thing that's out of character is that it was a concise sentence that was clear and to the point, and it directly resolved an issue and concern we had with Nick. The fact that it wasn't ambiguous in any ways, that was shocking. That's about the only thing that was shocking.
Yeah. There wasn't like some hook at the end of that, where it's like trying to reel you in.
Yep. Anything else on Senior Nick? No? Okay, let's move on. Daniel Cormier coming out and basically telling us what we all know, that he is not retiring on his birthday for obvious reasons, because he hasn't had the Brock Lesnar fight, hasn't had the John Jones trilogy fight, hasn't had that last payout. But on top of that, I really want to discuss more of like what's next for Daniel Cormier. John Jones is fighting Anthony Smith coming up in a few weeks, or like a few months, or a couple months, I want to say. Brock Lesnar, that seems like it's just not likely for some reason. That seemed like it hasn't panned out, right? Like there was that big post-fight moment after Stipe Miocic. Brock got in the cage, but nothing has come to fruition. Nothing has really been said about it. Dana has been very coy about whether or not that is still going to happen. I just doubt it at this point. So what does Cormier do? It seems like both his money fights that he wanted for his retirement aren't there. If you're sort of in his camp, if you're in his team, what do you tell him, Fu?
And I don't really know. I know that it feels like people are more excited about some of the other fighters in that weight class, right? Like the fight coming up this weekend, I know is really like it's going to be a really fun fight. Cormier, it's really weird because the way he's dominated, I kind of would like to see the Stipe rematch, right? Just because Stipe's talked so much shit about that he shouldn't have been beat. And anytime that happens, you just want that roll it back, let DC prove that he's better than him, and then the guy has to kind of go away. But I think the Brock thing is ultimately what he's waiting on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
but that doesn't seem likely
the
anymore.
Stipe
right?
rematch could be fun, especially if he just dominates him. But Brock, that's the big one, I think, right?
I don't think we get the Stipe rematch. I also don't want it. Like, no offense. Like, I've never been a fan of people getting immediate rematches after they've been knocked out in early fashion. I didn't like when Cody Garbrandt got the immediate rematch, and look how that turned out. I'm not a big fan of it, usually on principle. So if you're DC, if I really have to recommend something to him, I would recommend maybe fighting. No, I think Alex Overeem has a fight already. Fuck yeah. I don't know. I think find a fight at heavyweight that's a different matchup than Stipe, that's fresh, and just get the ball rolling again. Just sort of be business as usual in a way. Because right now those big money fights doesn't seem to be there at this point.
Just stay busy with some defenses and wait till the big fight comes.
Quickly, Mario Amasaki in the chat saying who's had a better reign, GSP or DC? Clearly GSP. Like, come on. Like, that is without a doubt. GSP has had the best title reign, period. Longevity, competition level, like, GSP has the best reign in UFC history, without a doubt. A couple last topics of the day, then we're going to head out of here. Call in 323-870-4051. Press 1 to get in the queue. Yamasaki adding, he did lose to Matt Serra, though. Yeah, but he did then beat Matt Serra in a rematch. DC has rematched John Jones and lost in more devastating fashion.
Was it before or after the aliens abducted GSP that he lost?
Man, who knows, man. But those aliens brought back a fucking demigod that reigned 170 for a decade. God bless those aliens. Speaking of God blessing, Khabib is not really blessed right now, it seems. on top of him getting a very not lengthy suspension, a big monetary suspension, especially compared to what Conor received. And on top of him and his manager, the notorious and nefarious Ali Abdelaziz, who I have little to zero respect for. I should say just zero respect for. I'm not trying to get his interviews or his fighters' interviews, just being honest. Sorry. Khabib has been very vocal about sitting out, playing hard to get for the UFC in a lot of different ways. Dana has come out and said, no, you can't do that. I wonder how fast the UFC pulls the trigger on an interim title fight if Khabib does play hard to get. Because especially since Khabib, of all people, does seem like somebody that would play hardball in a very distinct way. I think Khabib would sit out and just be like, no, I'm not fighting again until you guys give me X, Y, and Z. That's honestly what I believe is to happen. I think Dana White and UFC are going to win out. I think Khabib is going to ultimately capitulate to whatever demands it is in negotiation and fight probably in the fall of this year. However, shout out to Khabib, at least for trying to take some sort of stance against the UFC and this suspension. But, Fu, your thoughts on this?
My first thought is, how do you find someone their entire, one entire fight purse, basically? Like the 500,000 or whatever. That's crazy. But I like Khabib. I think he's such a dominant fighter. I think the UFC will see this as a way to get Conor back into a belt, or to at least throw him into a big fight, right? I think they mentioned Ferguson and Conor, right? As potentially, when
Yes.
Dana was playing around with, if it takes too long, we have to do something. Don't get me wrong. Conor, Ferguson in the ring together, that's a hell of a fight. But I really hope that Khabib doesn't go super hard-headed, and I hope he just comes back and fights like Ferguson or something.
I hope so as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everyone can be in agreement and say Ferguson Khabib needs to happen. Put Conor and Cowboy together, make that happen. Find Nate Diaz a fucking fight. You have to give him something. If you don't bring Nate Diaz back in the fold, I think you lose another potential, not star, but something, right? I don't know. Sort of behind that, Dustin Poirier, God knows what happens with him next. Edson Barboza versus Justin Gaethje. The lightweight division looks so great. So many great matchups, but those top fights need to happen. We need Khabib Tony. We need that resolution. Tony is clear and far away the number one contender. It should not go to anyone else. And if there is an interim title fight, if they throw an interim title on a Conor Cowboy fight, man, Tony is gonna be pissed. I cannot wait to see that, to be honest. But
here's the thing. I would love a Conor Cowboy fight. I mean, I know it screws a lot of stuff up, but that's a good fight. And I would pick Cowboy over Conor. But no, I mean, how many times has it been that Khabib and Ferguson have lined up for a fight and something has happened?
I think three. I think three. Yeah.
So if they line that fight up again and something happens, I mean, the MMA gods that you were praying to earlier just may never want that.
Oh no, they're vengeful bitches, man. God damn, how dare they? Honestly, if they were to do that, that's really all I have to say about that. But please, let's have these fights get made. Lightweight is such an insane division right now. I don't think there's any parallel we can have with combat sports with how deep that division is. But anyways, last topic of the day, and it's actually really an unfortunate topic we have to get to. But one I'm going to try to take the silver lining from in some aspect. PFL has suspended Josh Copland indefinitely following alleged domestic violence incident. I will say this. Obviously, due process, all the bullshit aside, because it is an allegation, like there is due process. But PFL basically immediately suspending him indefinitely, I think is such a great move, honestly. And I think it's such an easy move to make. Like the fact that the UFC has Greg Hardy and has pushed him on ESPN, right? Like it is crazy the parallels we have within our own industry of how people are treated for domestic violence, how promoters treat people for domestic violence. This is the way you do it. This is it. As a promoter, this is exactly what you do when your fighter gets accused of something like this. Immediately, without hesitation, just suspend them indefinitely. And just add that word indefinitely, because you add no timetable to it. It leaves you a lot of options and fluidity with your business decisions if you have to make them, whatever that may be, from a very corporate, blood-sucking perspective. But at least you have the very basic PR instinct to go, hey, let's suspend this guy right now just to make sure. UFC has ultimately and continually failed to do that. The PFL fucking did it. That is absolutely shocking. And I have a lot of criticism for PFL, but this is not one. I will applaud them for this move, and I hope other promoters take a look at this and how easy it is to do and just follow suit. It saves you so much headache from a PR perspective alone, let alone just being the right thing to do. From a moral perspective, from a business perspective, it's the easy, safe option to do. Your thoughts on this, Fu? Any sort of macro things to take from it? Yeah, go to you.
Yeah, I mean, looking big picture, the NFL did this with Ray Rice, like pretty much they took a little bit longer, but they made that, hey, this is an indefinite suspension until this shit's cleared up. They actually got video of it, so it was a little easier, I think, for them to make that decision. But he came back, and I think he's playing football again. This guy, serve some kind of suspension, probably come back, but they really need to take a stronger stance on this. I mean, I think we talk about this a lot as fans of the sport. We really put up with a lot of shitty human beings to keep, because they entertain us when they're in the ring. Mayweather being one,
especially when it's like juxtaposed with, this is MMA, right? This is in the same era where women's MMA has become arguably the most dominant female sport in America. Like, you could legitimately make that argument, right? Like, I'm not off base on that, Fu. And yeah, and within that same sport, we have repeat domestic violence offenders, alleged domestic violence offenders fight at the highest level, get pushed at the highest level. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, there needs to be some sort of like coming to Jesus moment, to use that term, for the MMA fan base, because those two things cannot coexist long term. You cannot simultaneously have a rising women's sport that we applaud and we support, that is continuing to get more and more equal to the men's side, and also continuing to turn a blind eye to when men abuse women. Like, those two things just cannot coexist. They can't, in my mind. So, push come to shove, UFC, Bellator, whoever, this is an easy stance to take. Just take it. Honestly, it's not that hard. UFC, get rid of Greg Hardy. That is more headache than it is deserved or worth at all. So just do it. It's not that hard. Like, I feel like I'm talking to a child here about very basic concepts that the child still doesn't understand. It's just frustrating. Again, shout out to PFL. This was a great decision to make.
And worse, like with the Greg Hardy thing, he had a terrible showcase, and still Dana was backing him.
Yep.
And it's like, there's no reason to back this shit human being. Just,
he's a shit fighter, a shit human being.
It.
Like,
let's move on.
Like, if it was Conor McGregor that was like alleged to abuse someone, I think it would like not be understandable that the UFC gets behind him, but like we would get it, right? Like, oh, Conor McGregor makes the UFC so much money. Of course they're going to get around him and circle the wagons. Like, that makes sense. But Greg fucking Hardy? Really? Really, guys? No. That's the hill Dana White and the UFC want to die on for domestic violence abusers, is Greg Hardy.
The Dallas Cowboys.
Go for it. Go for it, Dana and the UFC. Please, please die on that hill. I will love to see that. You're letting the PFL outshine you. God damn.
You're basically in the same category as Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys at that point, which is, it's all money.
I bet they love hearing that comparison, though. Let's be honest.
I mean, they do. They only care about money.
They do.
Like both of those organizations. It's like, if that guy is going to sell some tickets or have some fame, who cares what he does in his personal time? Who cares how it makes the brand look, right? And I agree with Mario. Like, Matt and I talk about this a lot. Like, the domestic violence thing is very big to me. I mean, coming from a family where my dad was an alcoholic, and I mean, would go on like week benders and come home and throw the couch over on my mom and stuff when she was sleeping with kids on it, so like it's a bad look. They got to do better. And like you said, props to these guys for doing it. But let's see if the big guys do it now. Like big boxing promoters, like the UFC, Bellator, like, do they take these stances? Do they just shut these people down right off and kind of prove to people they're not going to put up with that shit human being stuff,
Agreed. A stance needs to be taken. I've talked about this before. Like, at the very least, like, if there's not a very honest conversation that's being had between the UFC, the media, and the fans, the fighters, all together about what and who we allow in the sport. If there's not that, at least, thank God, nothing's going to get solved, and we're going to continue to let the worst of society within our sport. And I think that just needs to be some sort of addressment to that. But digressing, sort of a downer note to leave on the show, but Israel Adesanya, fantastic performance, star in the making, superstar in my mind, probably in a couple years. Can't wait to see what's next for that guy. It just seems like the stars the limit. And also, like, it's good to have a fresh, young talent in the sport. Like, whenever that happens, like, I think as media and food, you're going to feel this as you do more shows. Like, there's less and less moments you feel like a fan. Adesanya winning on Saturday night, that made me feel like a fan again. Like that, when those moments happen, you know it's a moment in history. And I think as the years roll on, it's going to become more and more of a bigger moment, especially that line from Anderson saying, "I'm passing it to you," meaning the torch. Definitely just a massive moment potentially in MMA history, depending how Adesanya turns out, obviously. But this has been our UFC 234 review. I'm Matt the Hipster Hunter. You can find me at Matt Hunter MCR, all platforms. Fugatti, where can people find you? And your final thoughts.
Final thoughts, man. It was cool to be a part of that moment, obviously, with the Adesanya Silva fight. Really gave me goosebumps when you watch the video of Silva saying, "I'm passing the torch," You guys can find me at Fugatti_MCR on Instagram or Twitter. Thanks for joining us so late, guys. See ya.
Yes, hit the like button to the show on the way out. If you listen on podcast for and drop that 5-star review, go do it right now. Go write it out. Write the review. I want a paragraph or like a sentence, like a word would do. It could be 1 star. I'll take literally anything. I'm easy. You know what I mean?
If you write it too long, then Matt has to read for a long time on the air.
And I love a dramatic reading. You know me. And head over to patreon.com/Mixed Combat Radio to go support the show in any financial way. Just did a show earlier today on Patreon exclusively. A show yesterday on Patreon exclusively. UK Hour is coming back in a big, bad way. I don't think I've even announced that on our free show yet, is that UK Hour is coming back. I think I've been very secretive about that. But UK Hour is coming back for a 3-day exclusive window on Patreon, and then it's free to you guys in the public. So head over to patreon.com/Mixed Combat Radio. Have a great night. Stay safe. Peace.